outlaw women. Well, you know, the nice ones who do what they're supposed to do and who make it through life happily and quietly are not terribly interesting to write about. They're wonderful company, and I would like to be one of those women. But in fact, where your hackles rise and you want to, you know, propose a thesis or propose a question, this is what you need, somebody who is fierce, who breaks the law, social laws or other kinds of laws.
As a woman, a black woman in particular, there's a lot of different facets. It's a multitude, it's a plethora of things that comes to my mind as it relates to my womanhood, my femininity, my person, myself. For example, how I had to grind every single day, single, and I'm also a mother, thriving. It just really has its moments where you have to just sit back and just be like, whoa, like, wow, ain't I a woman? How is it that I'm able to do these things on a daily basis and still look pretty? What is femininity? What is sensuality? What is sexuality? What is being a woman? And one of my favorite people who can help me out in this particular subject when it comes to literature is Toni Morrison. And one of my most favorite books ever written that I've ever read in my life is Sula by Toni Morrison.
My thing, what I hope to do all the time, is to be so completely myself, which that's what I hope I am, to be so much myself that my audiences and even people who meet me are confronted. They're confronted with what I am, inside and out, as honest as I can be. In this way, they have to see things about themselves immediately.
What is up, everybody? It's your girl, Jada Reeds here, aka Diamond, back with another video. And as you heard from my intro, today we are going to be discussing Sula by Toni Morrison. I'm so nervous. Published in 1973. So really briefly, let's just talk about Sula in general and what it's about. So Sula is about the main character, Sula, and her best friend, Nell. It's not just about them, but the story is centered on who these two girls grow into be and who they are separate and who they are, or who they are individually and who they are together, and what made up both of their lives. And also what you're going to get is who raised the both of them. You're going to learn a little bit about Nell's mother and like how she was raised, and you're going to learn about Sula's mother and grandmother and a lot more about Sula's family than you do about Nell's family, because I think it takes a village to kind of sort of figure out why Sula became what she became. You see what I'm saying? Like, Sula grew up around tons of more people than Nell. Nell was more isolated, more secluded, more prim, more proper, more like her mother's prized piece, prized possession. And Sula was more of like a fixed thing inside of like, I don't know, like a Where's Waldo picture or something. Like, it was so many things going on in Sula's home that she was just there. And it was just like kind of sort of like an afterthought. Sula was like an afterthought. And so you'll learn about them. We'll get to know who they are individually. And then you learn about the people in the town, the bottom. And you learn about women and their ideals on themselves, their sensuality, their femininity, and how they thought about men, depending on who you were. Toni Morrison kind of sort of said in an interview that I found on YouTube that Sula was the dangerously free woman. She is also described as this mythic woman, a mythic creature, a mythic being. And we can kind of go into what that means, because I also wrote that down in my notes. So the mythic female refers to the portrayal of women in myths and legends, encompassing goddesses, heroines, and monsters. These figures often embody archetypes like wisdom, beauty, power, and danger, shaping cultural understanding of femininity. So that's in a nutshell Sula, and also we can say Nell. And I honestly want to just dive straight into the section where I was calling Get the Understanding of the Ideals of the Peace Women. Nell's last name is Wright, so Nell Wright, and then you have Sula Peace. And that is also another reoccurring theme that we could kind of focus on if we had the time. You know, Nell was always fixated and focused on doing the right thing because that is how Nell's mother raised her to be. And then you have Sula searching for that peace factor, because what did I tell you guys at the beginning? What did I say? Sula grew up in a house, it was like a boarding house. Sula had her mom, Hannah, her father died. So you have Eva, the grandmother, you have Hannah, the mother, you have Pearl, the sister, you have Plum, the brother, you have Tar Baby, which is like this fixture of a white man. They're assuming, Eva said this must be a white man that's running away from, who knows, white guilt or whatever. Then you have the Deweys, which are these 3 boys that were just given to the peace women. And then you have just a host of other people running in and out. So it's like in and out. So you have Sula constantly searching for that peace. Hence, Sula Peace. Nobody knew my rose of the world but me. I had too much glory. They don't want glory like that in nobody's heart. The rose tattoo. This quote is referenced before the story begins. Until you get to know Sula, you won't understand why it's here. Briefly, I will say that the rose in literature symbolizes love, beauty, and passion, while simultaneously symbolizing fragility, transience, and death. In this story, Sula has a rose-shaped birthmark on her face. These 2 girls are from a mythic city in Ohio called Medallion. Medallion is a city situated, Medallion is a city in in Ohio. Toni Morrison is from Lorain, Ohio, which is a city right outside of Cincinnati. And so a lot of her stories were centered or based in mythical and real cities from that state. And so she came up with this city, which is called Medallion. Okay, and Medallion, there were 2 separate communities, of course, the community of the whites and the community of the blacks. The blacks lived in a neighborhood called the Bottom, which ironically is situated at the top of the city, but it was called the Bottom. It's a lot of themes in this story that I won't be able to dive deep into all of them, but just know it's a lot of different things in this story. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about a lot of the references that Toni Morrison has and the themes that she has and what they mean or what you can take from them. We're not going to hit on every single thing. I'm going to particularly just hone in on the friendship that is here and a few other things. So they live in the Bottom. It's a black neighborhood in Medallion. The name itself, the Bottom, is a form of oppression, as the white landowner used language and promises to manipulate the black laborer. This establishes a theme of how language can be used to control and marginalize black communities. Suffering and acceptance, all of these things. In essence, the Bottom is a complex and multifaceted symbol that explores themes of oppression, resilience, suffering, and the enduring spirit of black communities. Okay, and so now we'll start with the beginning. So this book is broken up into chapters that are a tad bit longer, and they're the year. So it starts off with the year 1919. I'm going to read just a small excerpt from it. Except for World War II, nothing ever interfered with the celebration of National Suicide Day. It had taken place every January 3rd since 1920. Although Shadrach, its founder, was for many years the only celebrant, blasted and permanently astonished by the events of 1917, he had returned to Medallion, handsome but ravaged, and even the most fastidious people in the town sometimes caught themselves dreaming of what he must have been like a few years back before he went off to war. A young man of hardly 20, his head full of nothing and his mouth recalling the taste of lipstick. Shadrach had found himself in December 1917 running with his comrades across a field in France. It was his first encounter with the enemy, and he didn't know whether his company was running toward them or away. For several days, they had been marching, keeping close to a stream that was frozen at its edges, and at one point they crossed it, and no sooner had he stepped foot on the other side than the day was a dangle with shouts and explosions. Shell fire was all around him, and though he knew that this was something called it, he could not muster up the proper feeling, the feeling that would accommodate it. He expected to be terrified or exhilarated, to feel something very strong. In fact, he felt only the bite of a nail in his boot, which pierced the ball of his foot whenever he came down on it. So as you can imagine, 1917, that's World War II. Okay, Shadrach is one of the fixtures in this town that came up with this day called National Suicide Day. National Suicide Day was symbolic. It was a symbolic act by Shadrach, who is a veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. He creates this holiday, quote unquote, to give himself and the bottom a perceived sense of control over the tragedies that they face in their life, allowing them to process difficult emotions within a specific time frame. So what I gather from the book starting out with this, first you were given a preface sort of introduction to the city and its inhabitants, the town of the bottom and its inhabitants. And then you start off, and then Toni Morrison starts us off with 1919, giving us a tidbit of who Shadrach is and this day called National Suicide Day. And then you start to learn and gather maybe why she's starting that. And I feel like, to me, what I took from it is someone who's trying to take their power back. And the only way that they can do that is to invent something where they have the choice. To do or utilize suicide in your life means that you are deciding to finally put on your boots, pull up your big girl, big boy pants, and you're going to take charge of your own life, whether it be in the form or in the act of that said suicide. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but at some particular point in life, sometimes that's all certain people feel like they had left to do because everybody else is in control. This is the one thing that I can take charge of. And so I don't know why per se she started with that, but that is my feeling, if that makes any sense. Okay, and so then we move on. After learning about Shadrach and hearing about National Suicide Day, it'll continuously come up and peek out in and throughout the story. But we're going to go into the main characters and how they came to be. So Nell is spoken of, or we find out about Nell first through her parents. Her mom, Nell's mom's name is Helene, and her dad's name was Wiley. Helene is a Creole woman from New Orleans, and I really feel like she was a distant relative of Wiley. I don't know why I feel like that. I guess the language sort of hinted at the idea that he might have been a second, third, or maybe fourth cousin. I'm not sure. And it just took one look at her when Wiley was visiting in New Orleans, because he was a ship or a dock or a boat worker, and he asked Helene's grandparents or grandmother if he could take or have her hand in marriage. So he took Helene at the tender age of, I want to say, 16. She left New Orleans and she moved to the bottom, where she and Wiley built their life together. After 9 years together, then they had Nell. So let's go into the birth of Nell, or the depiction or description of Nell. Her meaning Helene. Her daughter was more comfort and purpose than she had ever hoped to find in this life. She rose grandly to the occasion of motherhood, grateful, deep down in her heart, that the child had not inherited the great beauty that was hers, that her skin had dusk in it, that her lashes were substantial, but not undignified in their length, that she had taken the broad, flat nose of Wiley, although Helene expected to improve it somewhat, and his generous lips. Under Helene's hand, the girl became obedient and polite. Any enthusiasm that little Nell showed were claimed by the mother until she drove her daughter's imagination underground. Helene Wright was an impressive woman, at least in medallion she was. Heavy hair in a bun, dark eyes arched in a perpetual query about other people's manners. A woman who won all social battles with presence and a conviction of the legitimacy of her authority. Since there was no Catholic church in Medallion then, she joined the most conservative black church and held sway. It was Helene who never turned her head in church when latecomers arrived. Helene who was established the practice of seasonal altar flowers. Helene who introduced the giving of banquets of welcoming to returning Negro veterans. She lost only one battle, the pronunciation of her name. The people in the bottom refused to say Helene. They called her Helen, right, and left it at that. All in all, her life was a satisfactory one. She loved her house and enjoyed manipulating her daughter and her husband. She would sigh sometimes just before falling asleep, thinking that she had indeed come far enough away from the sundown house. So that is what the house was called that Helene grew up and was raised in New Orleans. And we'll reference the sundown house later on in the video. But what I could take from that particular piece, although we don't learn too much about Nell, is that her mom was very prim, very proper, very distinguished in her own right. She had a very neatness about her, and she was very particular about a lot of things. Those few paragraphs said a lot about how Nell was going to grow up and be raised. What does it say here? And I quote, "Under Helene's hand, the girl became obedient and polite. Nothing else. She didn't do anything else in this life, but was obedient and polite to her mother." We're setting the stage for what type of girl, then woman, Nell is going to grow into. All right, and so that's all we kind of get at first glance when it comes to Nell and her family. So now let's introduce you guys to Sula and her family, which is just a couple of pages down the line. The many experiences of her trip crowded in on her, meaning Nell. The many experiences of Nell's trip crowded in on her. She slept. It was the last as well as the first time she was ever to leave Medallion. For days afterwards, she imagined other trips she would take, alone though, to faraway places. Contemplating them was delicious. Leaving Medallion would be her goal, but that was before she met Sula, the girl she had seen for 5 years at Garfield Primary, but never played with, never knew, because her mother said that Sula's mother was Sooty. The trip, perhaps, of her newfound meanness gave her the strength to cultivate a friend in spite of her mother. When Sula first visited the Wright house, Helene's curdled scorn turned to butter. Her daughter's friend seemed to have none of the mother's slackness. Nell, who regarded the oppressive neatness of her home with dread, felt comfortable in it with Sula, who loved it and would sit on the red velvet sofa for 10 to 20 minutes at a time, still as dawn. As for Nell, she preferred Sula's woolly house, where a pot of something was always cooking on the stove, where the mother, Hannah, never scolded or gave directions, where all sorts of people dropped in, where newspapers were stacked in the hallway and dirty dishes left for hours at a time in the sink, and where a one-legged grandmother named Eva handed you goobers from deep inside her pockets or read you a dream. So here is where we get the distinct differences of who Nell was raised by and who Nell was becoming, and who Sula was raised by and who Sula would become later on. They are polar opposites, but also both two sides of the same coin. Okay, if that makes any sense, but we'll learn about that later. And so at this particular point in the story, you're starting to see, I guess, Toni Morrison giving you the idea of how two girls, which I skipped over a lot of stuff, but understand that Nell was a very lonely child because she was an only child. She was very lonely. Sula also, we'll learn, is a very lonely child, and she was looking for something, yearning for something deep. Also, Shadrach in the beginning of the story was a very lonely man, and he was interested in something or taking upon something or searching for something with better or deeper meaning. So throughout this story, I recognize a theme of loneliness, and also how that loneliness will like pull you towards something or someone. Okay, so I still want to go a little bit further, and we're going to call this next part understanding the ideas of peace women and their love for men. So briefly, I'll say this about Eva. Eva is the matriarch of the Peace family. Okay, had 3 children. So Eva married this man named Boy, and they had 3 children together. They had Hannah, they had Pearl, and then they had Ralph. Ralph's nickname was Plum. Okay, so 2 daughters and a son. And then he left, of course. Boy left, and left her to be a single parent and raise her children on her own. Next thing you know, it is implied but never fully established that Eva leaves her children with her next door neighbor, leaves them just outright. She's gone for about 1.5 years, and she comes back with one leg and a bunch of money for that particular time period. And so it's implied that she must have put her leg, I guess, like laid on a railroad and let a train run over her leg and to collect insurance money. It's implied but never fully established, but that is what happened. She comes back with the money, builds a boarding house so that she could have continuous money, right? So that is what Eva decides to do, okay? And so you already get that idea at the beginning of the story, or when what Toni Morrison is setting up is that, you know, I will do anything for my family. I will do anything for my kids. As a matriarch, as a mother left by the patriarch, by the father of the family, you are going to have to figure it out on your own. And so Eva came up with this plan because she'd rather lose a limb, collect the money so that her children can forever have something stable in their lives, so that she could come back and she could be better than she was before. She's willing to do that. So you have a mother willing to do anything for her children. That's how I look at it. That's my perception. So now I'm reading off of page 41. I'm going to start here. I'm going to read quite a bit. Okay, just quite a bit, but just let me cook, okay? Rock with me, okay? We're here for a while. Just get you something to drink. Just relax and just listen to my voice play in the background, okay? Under Eva's distant eye and prey to her idiosyncrasies, her own children grew up stealthily. Pearl married at 14 and moved to Flint, Michigan, from where she posted frail letters to her mother with $2 folded into the writing paper. Sad little nonsense letters about minor troubles, her husband's job, and who the children favored. Hannah married a laughing man named Ruckus, I don't know how to pronounce his name, who died when her daughter Sula was about 3 years old, at which time Hannah moved back into her mother's home, prepared to take care of it and her mother forever. With the exception of Boy, those peace women loved all men. It was man love that Eva bequeathed to her daughters. Probably, people said, because there were no men in the house, no men to run it. But actually, that was not true. The peace women simply loved maleness for its own sake. Eva, old as she was and with one leg, had a regular flock of gentlemen callers, and although she did not participate in the act of love, there was a good deal of teasing and pecking and laughter. The men wanted to see her lovely calf, the neat shoe, and watch the focusing that sometimes swept down out of the distances in her eyes. They wanted to see the joy in her face as they settled down to play checkers, knowing that even when she beat them, as she always did, somehow in her presence, it was they who had won something. It was they who had done something. They would read the newspaper loud to her and make observations on its content. And Eva would listen, feeling no obligation to agree, and in fact, would take them to task about the interpretation of events. But she argued with them with such an absence of bile, such a concentration of man love, that they felt their convictions solidified by her disagreement. With other people's affairs, Eva was equally prejudiced about men. She fussed interminably with the brides of the newlywed couples for not getting their men's supper ready on time, about how to launder shirts, press them, etc. Your man be here directly. Ain't it about time Your man be here directly. Ain't it about time you got busy? Miss Eva, it'll be ready. We just having spaghetti. Again, Eva's eyebrows fluttered up, and the newlywed pressed her lips together in shame. Hannah simply refused to live without the attentions of a man. She simply refused to live without the attentions of a man. Ruckus's death had a steady sequence of lovers, mostly the husbands of her friends and neighbors. Her flirting was sweet, low, and guileless, without ever a pat of the hair, a rush to change clothes, or a quick application of paint. With no gesture whatsoever, she rippled with sex. In her same old print wraparound, barefoot, in the summer, in the winter, her feet in a man's leather slippers with the backs flattened under her heels. She made men aware of her behind, her slim ankles, the dewy smooth skin, and the incredible length of neck. Then the smile eyes, the turn of the head, also welcoming, light and playful. Her voice trailed, dipped, and bowed. She gave a chord to the simplest word. Nobody, but nobody could say, "Hey, sugar," like Hannah. When he heard it, the man tipped his hat down a little over his eyes, hoisted his trousers, and thought about the hollow place at the base of her neck. And all this without the slightest confusion about work and responsibilities. While Eva tested and argued with her men, leaving them feeling as though they had been in combat with a worthy, if amiable foe, Hannah rubbed no edges, made no demands, made the man feel as though he were complete and wonderful, just as he was. He didn't need fixing, and so he relaxed and swooned in the Hannah light that shone on her simply because he was. When those places were not available, she would slip into the seldom used parlor or even up in her room. She liked the last place least, not because Sula slept in the room with her, but because her love mate's tendencies was always to fall asleep afterward, and Hannah was fastidious about whom she slept with. She would fuck practically anything, but sleeping with someone implied for her a measure of trust and a definite commitment. One more. Seeing her step so easily into the pantry and emerge looking precisely as she did when she entered, only happier, taught Sula that sex was pleasant and frequent, but otherwise unremarkable. Okay. So that in and of itself was a mouthful, right? A total and complete mouthful. I read you a lot. But in those few pages, and I skipped around just a tad bit, but in those few pages, you start to understand and learn, me as a reader, that a lot of the qualities that your parent possesses, it's almost inevitable that you will follow in those same footsteps. A lot of the characteristics that Hannah had, Sula will grow into because that is the only person that she watched. And it was almost as if Hannah was so fixated on men, or quote unquote man love in particular, and not on her child, that Sula was left to watch and look and peek in the crooks and crevices and pick up on these habits and tendencies that she watched her mom do. And she's just like, this must be life. This must be life. In reading that, I also thought, like, why is it that Hannah chose or felt like she could not live without the attentions of a man? Why wasn't the one man that she had good enough for the time being? And why didn't she want to give more of herself to her child, more of herself to her daughter? Like, what was wrong with Sula? Or what did Hannah need? What was she searching for? And that goes back to that lonely piece that I said. Like, every character had this like deep, unsullied loneliness inside of them. And instead of looking to the things that you've created or your family or etc., you are seeking the validation of the opposite sex, because that's the only way that you're going to be or feel fulfilled in this life. And so that's something that I took away from learning about that man love that the peace women just simply could not live without. For example, Eva knew that, okay, these men aren't going to take me seriously. These men don't want me. You know, I'm older. I have grown kids. But I do know that I'm a worthy competitor. And also, I know how to treat a man. I know what a man wants. I know what he likes to hear. And even though I can't perform in other ways, I can give these things upon myself to make them continuously come back for more, for more, for more. so that I'm not so lonely in my endeavors in this life that I can at least have the company of a man here, you know? And so it's honestly sad to think about, but I also I understand it. Back in these days, you know, at this particular time, we are in 1921. We just get those little tiny pieces of Toni Morrison kind of just inserting or building upon these characters to get us to understand where she's taking us in the story. And then it's not so much a linear story, because although we're learning in the grand scheme about Nell and Sula, and we're gathering a lot about who these girls are through their family, she's still taking us in and out of timelines. So after we get these pieces about men love and how Eva and Hannah thrive off of the attention of men, Toni Morrison takes us into learning about Plum, whose real name is Ralph, who's Eva's son. I'm going to read this. Eva's last child, Plum, to whom she hoped to bequeath everything, floated in a constant swaddle of love and affection until 1917, when he went to war. He returned to the States in 1919, but did not get back to Medallion until 1920. He wrote letters from New York, from Washington, D.C., and Chicago, full of promises of homecomings, but there was obviously something wrong. Finally, some 2 or 3 days after Christmas, he arrived with just a shadow of his old dip-down walk. His hair had been neither cut nor combed in months. His clothes were pointless and had no socks. But he did have a black bag, a paper sack, and a sweet, sweet smile. Everybody welcomed him and gave him a warm room next to Tar Babies and waited for him to tell them whatever it was he wanted them to know. They waited in vain for his telling, but not long for the knowing. His habits were much like Tar Babies, but there were no bottles, and Plum was sometimes cheerful and animated. Hannah watched and Eva waited. Then he began to steal from them, take trips to Cincinnati, and sleep for days in his room, with the record player going. He got even thinner, since he ate only snatches of things and beginnings or endings of meals. It was Hannah who found the bent spoon black from steady cooking. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like, that's why I said I'm so nervous about talking about this book, because she gives you so much in such a short time frame. It's just like a lot to digest. But I felt important to just insert that part into this review, I guess. Because once again, let's keep on. Let's go. Who did we meet first? We met Shadrach first, who's also an Army veteran, who took it upon himself to create a holiday where it's called National Suicide Day to basically take his own power back. Let me take my power back that has been stripped from me because of all the things that I've seen fighting for a country that will never fight back for me. And then we go into learning about Nell and how lonely it must have been to grow up in the sundown house, right? And then the juxtaposition of Nell's countenance to what she felt like was what was wrong with Sula's family. Hannah, Sula's mom, Hannah, she was woolly. They were sooty, rather. They were unpolished, unkempt. They were crowded with smoke. They were dirty. When at the Sundown House in New Orleans, the Sundown House was a whorehouse, and Hannah's mother was a prostitute, right? So it's like her running away from that lifestyle into something better or different for herself, quote unquote, that she thought. And then raising her child to be prim, proper, and always obedient, polite, and right. Okay? To where it was like, you beat these things into her, but not literally beat her. The story never suggests that Nell was beaten, but you raised her to be this way, but she gravitated towards someone who was such an opposite of hers. That loneliness piece. And Sula gravitates back to Nell because of loneliness' sake. But also Sula learns that certain aspects of sex, rather, or these things, she's picking up on things constantly so that she can figure out how to win or maneuver in this life. And then you're learning about Eva and Hannah and why they crave the attention of men. And then here we get Plum. Went and fought for his country, came back a strung out heroin addict. Okay, right? So then let's skip over a little bit. This is now Eva, just one page later, down at the bottom. Eva and Plum together. Hey man, hey, you holding me, mama? His voice was drowsy and amused. He chuckled as though he had heard some private joke. Eva held him closer and began to rock back and forth. She rocked him, her eyes wandering around his room. There in the corner was a half-eaten store-bought cherry pie, balled up candy wrappers and empty pop bottles peeped from under the dresser. On the floor by her foot was a glass of Strawberry Crush and a Liberty magazine. Rocking, listening to Plum's occasional chuckles, Eva let her memory spin, loop and fall. Plum in the tub that time as she leaned over him. He reached up and dripped water into her bosom and laughed. Mama, you so pretty. Mama, you so pretty, mama. Eva lifted her tongue to the edge of her lip to stop the tears from running into her mouth. Rocking. Later, she laid him down and looked at him a long time. Suddenly, she was thirsty and reached for the glass of Strawberry Crush. She put it to her lips and discovered it was blood-tainted water. Threw it to the floor. Plum woke up and said, "Hey, mama, why don't you go on back to sleep? I'm all right. Didn't I tell you I'm all right? Go on now." Plum, on the rim of a warm light sleep, was still chuckling. Mama, she sure was something. He felt twilight. Now there seemed to be some kind of wet light traveling over his legs and stomach with a deeply attractive smell. It wound itself, this wet light, all around him, splashing and running into his skin. Was this some kind of baptism? Some kind of blessing, he thought? Everything is going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right, it said. Knowing that it was so, he closed his eyes and sank back into the bright hole of sleep. Eva stepped back from the bed and let the crutches rest under her arms. She rolled a bit of newspaper into a tight stick, about 6 inches long, lit it, and threw it out on the bed, where the kerosene soaked. Plum lay in snug delight. Eva looked into Hannah's eyes. Is my baby burning? The two women did not speak, for the eyes of each were enough for the other. Then Hannah closed her eyes and ran toward the voices of neighbors calling for water. There's also this continuous theme of the mother who will do anything for her children, right? So Eva would have rather Plum kept his dignity intact by dying this type of death, or her killing him to preserve some sort of sense of self of him, or maybe her perception of him, than to let him disintegrate and die a slow death, turning into a junkie. She thought it was more like, okay, let me end your suffering, my son, for I know you've been through so much with this war. These men were going to war as children, which is why they were coming back and searching for something to numb them, to kill the pain. And so majority came back trying drugs. Some of them weren't able or were able to abstain, but then some of them sunk deeper and deeper into the abyss, becoming these addicts. That Eva just was like, I'm not having it. I'd rather preserve your memory and who you are as a man by setting you on fire myself. For I gave you life and I'm equipped to take it. She decided to just go ahead and put him out of his misery. I don't know why Toni put it in this particular portion of the story. I really don't understand that part, because we were just learning so much about Eva and Hannah, but I guess it doesn't it doesn't matter because, you know, they were all a part of the same household. So maybe that's why. Like, let's go ahead and talk about how Pearl was here and she's completely gone. Pearl was just like a figment of our imagination, for she only got like a paragraph in the story. And then I guess she wanted to also insert Plum in and also put him out. As quickly as he came, he went. But either way, this might be setting us up for continuously understanding and learning about the matriarch of this family, the strong woman in this family. Was it right? Absolutely not. But at this particular time, 1921, who gonna stop them? They're separated. They're completely separated from everyone. They're up in the bottom, as Toni Morrison writes it in the story. Every time she mentions the bottom, she doesn't say down in the bottom. She says up in the bottom because the bottom is on top of Medallion. So yeah, she loved her son so much that she didn't want to see him suffer, so she took his life. Okay, so let's move into Sula's realizations, right? Sula's growing up. The girls are growing up. They're about 12 right now, 1921. So we're traveling back in time, okay? So I have an asterisk where I'm trying to like make particular points. So I'm going to start here. Remember, Hannah is Sula's mother. Hannah put down some dough, all talking casually about one thing and another, and had gotten around, when Sula passed by, to the problems of child rearing. They a pain. Yeah, wish I listened to mama. She told me to not have them too soon. Anytime at all is too soon for me. Oh, I don't know. My Rudy minds his daddy. He just wild with me. Be glad when he grown and gone. Hannah smiled and said, shut your mouth. You love the grown. You love the ground he pee on. Sure I do. But he's still a pain. Can't help loving your own child no matter what they do. Well, Hester grown now, and I can't say love is exactly what I feel. Sure you do. You love her, like I love Sula. I just don't like her. That's the difference. Mind you, Sula heard this. Sure, they different people, you know. Guess so. Liking them is another thing. She only heard Hannah's words, and the pronouncement sent her flying up the stairs. In bewilderment, she stood at the window, fingering the curtain edge, aware of a sting in her eye. Nell's call floated up and into the window, pulling her away from dark thoughts back into the bright, hot daylight. So that is when, or that little tiny section, those little tiny words, sure I love her, sure I do, I just don't like her. That I kind of sort of that, and the idea of this man love and what to accept from men, or how you're supposed to maneuver in this life as it relates to men. I think those two things in particular, that is what Sula built her identity upon. On top of being able to leave and come back or whatever have you, Sula built up this perception of what she was going to be like when she grew up, because she already realized then, or thought that she did, that her mother didn't like her, that her mother didn't want her. And if we can go back into this idea that Hannah decided that she was not going to live without the affections or attentions of men, she preferred them to even relaxing, hanging out, learning, understanding, and being with her own daughter. Sula decided she's gonna run with this. My mama don't even like me. My mama don't even love me. My mama don't like me. And then that's where things happen. Things get real. Things get critical. Okay. All right. So then let's fast forward 10 pages. Hannah's coming into her mother's room with an empty bowl and a peck of Kentucky Wonders and says, Mama, did you ever love us? Going on down a little bit. I mean, did you? You know, when we was little. No, I don't reckon I did. Not the way you thinking. skipping over some more. No time. There wasn't no time, not none. Soon as I got one day done, here come a night. With you all coughing and me watching so TB wouldn't take you off. And if you was sleeping quiet, I thought, oh Lord, they dead. And put my hand over my mouth to feel if the breath was coming. And put my hand over your mouth and feel if the breath was coming. What you talking about? Did I love you, girl? I stayed alive for you, didn't I? You can't. I stayed alive for you. You can't. I stayed alive for you. Can't you get that through your thick head? Or what is that between your ears? Heifer? Huh? And it's just like beating it. Okay, I fear I haven't been doing an excellent job, but I'm happy that I'm getting to the parts that really meant something to me, because this is setting up a lot of what's to come in this book. You know, those sentiments alone. Of course, I loved you, girl. I stayed alive for you, didn't I? You know, with all the suffering, with all the pain, I'm doing as much as I can to try to stay alive for my children. You know, it must have been, of course, we know all the atrocities and the adversities that the Black community has faced pretty much our entire existence here in America, okay? Even to this day. But the chief principle behind Eva's parenting was to stay alive for her children by any means necessary and do what she felt like she had to do to keep a home, to keep food, to keep them clean, to keep them bathed. I have to say that when I read the banter, the conversation between Eva and Hannah, this book really is gripping for me, because as a mother myself, I feel the same way. You know what I mean? I feel the same way. And I have to work extremely hard to stay on the straight and narrow, mentally and physically, for my child. Until you become a mother and are forced into single parenthood like I was, you won't understand what Eva is saying to Hannah right now. Hannah's feelings are valid as well. Everything that Hannah's saying is valid. Mama, did you love us? I mean, you never played with us. I skipped over a lot of stuff, but she's saying, like, why didn't you find the time to play with us? Why didn't you find the time to read to us? Why didn't you find the time to just sit and talk to us? You were always trying to figure out a new something, another way of this or that. Of course I loved you, baby. Not the way that you're looking for, but in my own ways. Sugar, I stayed alive for you. And that's precisely how I feel. You know, going back to what I said at the beginning, to be a woman, to be a natural woman, to be a Black woman, the essence of being a woman, being a mother is so, I can't think of the word right now, but it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And these parts of the story, they were just blowing my mind, because it was just like, nobody's wrong in this situation. Not Hannah, not Eva. Both of them are valid in their thought process of what it was to be the child and the mother, the adult, the grown person. It's just, I said a lot without saying anything, but it takes a very strong person to be able to raise children and still stick around for those children. Have those children and stay with those children. And then we move on. So right after that, right after what I said, girl, I stayed alive for you. Can't you get that through your thick head? Or what is that between your ears? Heifer? Moving on just a little bit more. After all that carrying on, just getting him out and keeping him alive, he wanted to crawl back in my womb. Oh. We're going back. So, fast forward just a little bit of them, going back and forth, arguing with each other about love and if Eva loved her children. Here's Hannah. Hannah looked into her mother's eyes. But what about Plum? What you kill Plum for, mama? And I'm just going to skip straight to it. He give me such a time. Looked like he didn't even want to be born. But he come out. Boys is harder to bear. You wouldn't know that, but they is. It was such a carrying on to get him born and to keep him alive, just to keep his little heart beating and his little old lungs cleared and look like when he came back from, and just to keep his little heart beating and his little old lungs cleared and look like when he came back from the war, he want to get back in. After all that carrying on, just getting him out and keeping him alive, he wanted to crawl back in my womb. And well, I ain't got the room no more even if he could do it. There wasn't peace for him in my womb. And he was crawling back, being helpless and thinking baby thoughts and dreaming baby dreams and messing his pants again and smiling all the time. He had room enough in my heart, but not in my womb. Not no more. I birthed him once, I couldn't do it again. He was grown, a big old thing. God have mercy, I couldn't birth him twice. I'd be laying here at night and he'd be downstairs in that room. But when I close my eyes, I see him 6 feet tall, smiling and crawling up the stairs, quiet like, so I wouldn't hear, and opening the door, soft, so I wouldn't hear. And he'd be creeping to the bed, trying to spread my legs, trying to get back up in my womb. He was a man, girl, a big old grown up man. I didn't have that much room. I kept on dreaming it, and I knowed it was true. One night it wouldn't be no dream. It'd be true, and I wouldn't have done it. But it'd be true, and I wouldn't have done, and I would have done it. Would have let him if I'd had the room. But a big man can't be a baby all wrapped up inside his mama no more. He'll suffocate. I done everything I could to make him leave me and go on and live and be a man, but he wouldn't. And I had to keep him out, so I just thought of a way he could die like a man, not all scrunched up inside my womb, but like a man. Eva couldn't see Hannah clearly for the tears, but she looked up at her anyway and said, by way of apology or explanation, or perhaps just by way of neatness, but I held him close first, real close. Sweet Plum, my baby boy. Girl, when I tell you this book has really took me through it, I think that explanation is a true way to put how much you love your children. And I mentioned it already, but just like that breakdown. And then I have to say that Eva actually goes on to die, right? Eva is outside trying to light a fire in the yard, and her dress catches on fire, and she can't get the dress out because she can't get the fire out because it's so windy. And in doing that, trying to pat out the fire on her dress and the wind blowing, it travels up the shaft and her legs get on fire, her arms, everything. She's just like a wild, mad woman trying to get herself, put the flames out. And so Eva, the mommy, notices this, and she's upstairs. And it goes back to the idea of she'll do anything for her children. Eva would do anything for her children. So Eva jumps out the window to try to make it to Hannah to help her. And she still crawls and crawls, and she's trying to crawl to her. But neighbors see her, and they're able to throw water on Hannah. And Hannah just lays there. But Eva's still crawling, still trying to make it to her child in time. But Eva ends up dying. Eva does end up dying. And guess who ends up living? Still. I mean, Hannah ends up dying. But Eva is still alive. And that thing of her and her motherhood, and it was just so important to her to stay alive for her children. And she'll do anything for her children. She'll die for her children, but she lived. She lived. All right, so Hannah dies, of course. She ends up dying on the way to the hospital. And Eva lives. And I'm going to read something here from this last part before we move into basically adult Nell and adult Sula. Lying in the color ward of the hospital, which was a screened corner of a larger ward, Eva mused over the perfection of the judgment against her. She remembered the wedding dream and recalled that weddings always meant death. And the red gown, well, that was the fire. As she should have known, she remembered something else too. And try as she might to deny it, she knew that as she lay on the ground trying to drag herself through the sweet peas and clover to get to Hannah, she had seen Sula standing on the back porch, just looking. Sula had watched Hannah burn, not because she was paralyzed, but because she was interested. I don't quite know what that means. And reading the rest of the book, I don't think I truly figured that out. But I just want to point out that Sula did not try to help her mother with the fire. She didn't try to find any water or anything to help her mom. She literally just watched her mom burn up. Okay, so now we're moving into 1927. Okay, 1927, the girls are about 17 years old. They're done with high school. And these are the parts these are my favorite parts of the story. Okay, so I'm going to get comfortable. We just got 78 pages of backstory. So now the girls are grown. And Nell gets married. So Nell marries this guy named Jude. Okay, she's 17. This is a real wedding. And I quote, "A real wedding in a church with a real reception afterward was rare among the people of the bottom. Expensive for one thing, and most newlyweds just went to the courthouse if they were not particular." All right, so that's one thing to note. You know, Helene made sure that Nell had a wonderful wedding, a beautiful wedding dress, a great reception, all of the things that were quote unquote necessary to put her daughter off and for her daughter to start her new life as a grown married woman. You know, I guess that's just what Nell decided to do. That was the right thing to do. The right thing to do, and Nell was raised to do the right thing. Settle down after you graduate from high school, get you a husband, have you some kids. Whole time, I would be thinking in the back of my mind, we are poor. We are poor, we are poor, we are poor. I want more for myself. I want to learn. I want to grow. Remember, I told you guys, I read at the beginning, Nell wanted to leave Medallion, but never would. She would never go anywhere. You got married and started having some babies, okay? Let's get into this man that she married, okay? He wasn't really aiming to get married. He was 20 then, and although his job as a waiter at the Motel Medallion was a blessing to his parents and their 7 other children, it wasn't nearly enough to support a wife. He had brought the subject up first. On the day the word got out that the town was building a new road, tarmac, that would wind through Medallion on down to the river, where a great new bridge was to be built to connect Medallion to Porter's Landing, the town on the other side. The war over, a fake prosperity was still around. In a state of euphoria with the hunger for more and more, the Council of Founders cast its eye toward a future that would certainly include trade from cross river towns. And it continues. His arms ached for something heavier than trays, for something dirtier than peelings. His feet wanted the heavy work shoes, not the thin-soled black shoes that the hotel required. So, as you can see, Jude is deciding that, you know what? There's prosperity coming to this town. I'm possibly going to be getting a better job. So what better thing to do before all of this happens is to set myself up with a wife. It's like having all of those things in place before you actually get the thing that you're looking for. So backwards, so a part of the Black community still to this day. A lot of times what I've learned just in my dating life early on in my teens and 20s, and then like to now, a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things are still the same. Men kind of depend on that nurturing feeling that they get from a woman in hopes that it'll help them and kind of sort of just like push them along. It's like you're no longer in the house with your mom and dads because they're not forcing you to do things that you no longer want to do. You're a grown up now. So naturally, you still want that feeling. You want someone that's going to have your back and your front, someone's going to rub your back and rub your feet and push you to greatness. So Jude was entertaining the idea of getting a wife because he really felt like he was about to get a good job. Back then, that's all you thought of. Wife, good job. Wife, good job, have some kids, and boom, that's that. I guess that's all the Black thought had at that particular time, unless you were somebody different, somebody special. That's all that you could aspire to. So he thought, I need a wife. Before you even got a good job, your thought was to get a wife. Here it says it. He wasn't really aiming to get married. He was 20 at the time. So he wasn't, but he had brought the subject up first on the day the word got out that the town was building a new road. So I'm going to bring up that we should get married because I'm finna get a good job to build a road. Like, I don't know. That's just not making any sense to me. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Let's keep going. It was after he stood in lines for 6 days running and saw the gang boss picked out thin-armed white boys from the Virginia hills and the bull-necked Greeks and Italians and heard over and over, nothing else today, come back tomorrow, that he got the message. So it was rage and a determination to take on a man's role anyhow that made him press nail about settling down. He needed some of his appetites filled, some posture of adulthood recognized, but mostly he wanted someone to care about his hurt, to care very deeply. And these sentiments alone, I'm on page 82, by the way. Reading something like that vexes me to my core because I gather that the idea at this time, the only reason why Black men wanted to marry Black women is so that they could, the woman meaning the woman, could bear all of the burdens of the hurt and pain that their husbands endure. And it leads me to the point of her bearing the burden of everything that he lacks in his life and it turning into mental, psychological, physical abuse. You know what I mean? That's all I gather from that quote. It's just like, that's the only thing that you see in me is that I'm here to bear those burdens of your life. And however they manifest is that's just what I'm going to receive. And that's why the Black woman is like the most disrespected. That's like the only thing you see when you look at me is that I'm just here to wear your shame and to wear your guilt. I'm here to coddle you. Is that what your mother did? Do you look at me as another mother? Do you respect me more than your mother? Like, I just get so vexed by reading that, And let's read some more. The more he thought about marriage, the more attractive it became. Whatever his fortune, whatever the cut of his garment, there would always be the hem, the tuck, and the fold that hid his raveling edges. A someone sweet, industrious, and loyal to shore him up. And in return, he would shelter her, love her, grow old with her. That trade-off is not legit. That trade-off is nothing to write home about. Nothing at all, by the way. Without that someone, he was a waiter hanging around the kitchen like a woman. With her, he was head of a household, pinned to an unsatisfactory job out of necessity. The two of them together would make one Jude. And I find so many things wrong with that. To me, Jude's ambition and curiosity for a better life should have led him somewhere farther from marriage. And the idea that it was okay for him to just settle with Nell, knowing full on, I don't really see anywhere in here that he loved her. It was just an idea presented at the time to allow him or to help him to cope with his inadequacies. And so because Nell was so right, play on words, and she was raised to be this meek, mild woman with such a soft temperament, she was there for him in his time of need, but he never really cared for her, not in the least bit. But I meant to tell you guys that upon Nell's marriage, like the day that Nell got married was the day that Sula left. And Sula would not return for 10 years. So Nell had been married 10 years when Sula returns, which is on the next page or so. She's going to come back home. And so you'll find that Sula has been living in San Francisco, New York, other places, and she went to college in Nashville, and she's just been a worldly woman, learning about herself and figuring out life and living different experiences with men, and traveling and things of that nature. And so she comes back to Medallion, and this is what happens. What ends up happening when Sula comes back home after us discussing this incel, before incel was something to be talked about amongst men, Jude's definitely that. She comes back home, of course, picks back up where she leaves off. She's very sassy woman. And there is this, let's read some more. Ajax was right about Nell. Except for an occasional leadership role with Sula, she had no aggression. Her parents had succeeded in rubbing down to her parents had succeeded in rubbing down to a dull glow any sparkle or splutter she had. Only with Sula did that quality have free reign. But their friendship was so close, they themselves had difficulty distinguishing one's thoughts from the other. When Jude began to hover around, she was flattered. All the girls liked him, and Sula made the enjoyment of his attentions keener, simply because she seemed always to want Nell to shine. They never quarreled. Those two, the way some girlfriends did over boys, or competed against each other for them. That sets up something else to learn about Sula as we go through the story. She's just so free, Accompanied by a plague of robins, Sula came back to Medallion. For some reason, when I was reading that, I don't remember looking it up before, so I decided to look it up this time. I looked up what a plague of robins meant. what was the meaning in literature. And the symbolism was a symbol for the way that narrow-minded people can easily misinterpret the world to fit into their biased opinions. They still dreaded the way a relatively trivial phenomenon could become sovereign in their lives and bend their minds to its will. Sula comes home snapping like crazy at Eva because mainly she is kind of scared of Eva because she knows the things that Eva is capable of. But, you know, Eva has her things to say too. Eva's telling her how she needs to settle down, how she needs to be with somebody and bear some children. Sula is like, I don't want to make somebody else. I want to make myself. And this is what you learn about her as she comes back home. She has gathered a lot of ideas about being a woman and the type of woman that she wants to be, and she's fixated on understanding more about herself and doesn't want to be bothered with anybody else. She knows who she is inside and out. She is herself through and through, and that's something that these people have never seen or heard before in their lives, especially a black woman. And so my favorite part in this story is when her and Nell reconnect, and how Nell realizes how much she has missed her friend because all of the light finds its way back to her eyes. All of the redness comes back to her cheeks. She becomes full again. She laughs more to the point of hysteria. Her stomach is hurting from how funny this woman Sula is. Sula makes her remember herself. She really does. Sula brings life back into Nell's life. She does. Talking to Sula had always been a conversation with herself, says Nell. Sula never competed. She simply helped others define themselves. Although it was she alone who saw this magic, she did not wonder at it. She knew it was all due to Sula's return to the bottom. It was like getting the use of an eye back, having a cataract removed. Her old friend had come home, Sula, who made her laugh, who made her see old things with new eyes, in whose presence she felt clever, gentle, and a little raunchy. Let's hear a little bit of Sula and Nell banter. Hey, girl. The rose mark over Sula's eye gave her a glance, a suggestion of startled pleasure. It was darker than Nell remembered. Hey, yourself. Come on in here. How you doing? Sula moved a pile of iron diapers from a chair and sat down. Oh, I ain't strangled nobody yet, so I guess I'm all right. Well, if you change your mind, call me. Somebody need killing. Half this town need it, and the other half, a drown-out disease. Oh, come on. Is medallion that bad? Didn't nobody tell you? You been gone too long, Sula. Not too long, but maybe too far. What's that supposed to mean? Nell dipped her fingers into the bowl of water and sprinkled a diaper. Oh, I don't know. Want some cool tea? Lots of ice? I'm burning up. Iceman don't come yet, but it's good and cold. That's fine. Hope I didn't speak too soon. Kids run in and out of here so much. Nell bent to open the icebox. You putting it on, Nell. Jude must be wore out. Jude must be wore out. You don't care nothing about my back, do you? Is that where it is? Is that where it's at? In your back? Ha! Jude think it's everywhere. He's right. It is everywhere. Just be glad he found it, wherever it is. Remember John L? When Shirley said he got her down by the well and tried to stick it in her hip, Nell giggled at the remembrance of that teen time tale. She should have been grateful. Have you seen her since you've been back? Like a ox. That was one dumb, you know what, N-word. John L. Maybe he was just sanitary. Sanitary? Well, think about it. Suppose Shirley was all that splayed out in front of him. Wouldn't you go for the hip bone instead? Nell lowered her head onto crossed arms while tears of laughter dripped into the warm diapers. Laughter that weakened her knees and pressed her bladder into action. Her rapid soprano and Sula's dark, sleepy chuckle made a duet that frightened the cat and made the children run in from the backyard. Puzzled at first by the wild free sounds, then delighted to see their mother stumbling merrily toward the bathroom, holding onto her stomach, fairly singing through the laughter. You see what I'm saying? You see? You see? See, Nell missed her friend so much. You know, it's always one thing to think that the part of you that's missing is a significant other, a monogamous relationship with somebody who you can lay with, laugh with, you know, have sex with, marry, bear children for, all those things that women or men think that they're missing. You're looking for in a partner in that way, when the whole time all you were missing was your friend. And that little banter, that little conversation between the two of them just really made me realize that, which I've already started understanding this concept and this idea, because I have been a single woman for what's to me is a long time. I'm going on 5 years now. I've been single, not attached to anyone outright, but enjoying the time that I have spent over the years with my girlfriends, which I don't have many now, but in the past I've had them, and there were some of the best times of my life. And recently hanging out with one of my homegirls, so much fun. So I have so much fun with them. And so what Toni Morrison is doing here and making you, or in making Nell remember the joy that is a friend, something that Jude could never bring into her life. He could never bring this happiness into her life. He could never make her laugh like this, you know, because he's already in so much pain. He's already in so much strife, so much agony, because what is a man that cannot provide, one, for himself, and second, for his family, you know? But with a friend who understands your innermost, deepest thoughts, who sees you for exactly who you are, who wants nothing but the best from you, who wants to take nothing from you but give you everything, it's something else in and of itself that I truly think that I desire more than ever. I think I remember mentioning that when I was talking about the Sally Rooney books, and especially Beautiful World, Where Are You? And the friendship between Eileen and what's the other woman? Those two girls in that book. Like, oh my goodness, like, it's something, you know, that those friendships, they mean something, honestly. And the more I think about it, the more serious I'm taking all of my new friendships, the friendships that I am garnering now, long distance or in the same city. You know, those I think are going to become the fabric of my life, to say the least. And reading Nell and Sula in this book, the easier parts to read, the joyful parts to read, just, it does nothing but reassure me that that is exactly what I need and what I'm looking for in my life. So yeah. So of course you guys know, you know, Nell is married, so we're going to go now into Jude entering into the house and Sula being there. So all right, so we've already got a little bit of the type of man Jude is. Okay, we already know. All right, all that whining and shit that he doing, the fact that he even chose a wife just so that she could be the bearer of all of his bad news is, you know, we know what type of man this is. So he comes in the house and this is what he has to say. Hey, Jude, this is Sula talking. Hey, Jude, what you know good? White man running it, nothing good. Sula laughed while Nell, high-tuned to his moods, ignored her husband's smile, saying, "Bad day, honey?" "Same old stuff," he replied, and told them a brief tale of some personal insult done him by a customer and his boss. A whiny tale that peaked somewhere between anger and a lapping desire for comfort. He ended it with the observation that a Negro man had a hard row to hoe in his world. He expected his story to dovetail into milkworm commiseration. But before Nell could excrete it, Sula said she didn't know about that. It looked like a pretty good life to her. Say what? Jude's temper flared just a bit as he looked at this friend of his wife's. This slight woman, not exactly plain, but not fine either, with a copper head over her eye. As far as he could tell, she looked like a woman roaming the country trying to find some man to burden down with a lot of lip and a lot of mouths. Sula was smiling. I don't know what the fuss is about. Everything in the world loves you. White men love you. They spend so much time worrying about your penis, they forget their own. The only thing they want to do is cut off a nigga's privates. And if that ain't love and respect, I don't know what is. And white women, they chase you all to every corner of the earth. Feel for you under every bed. I know a white woman wouldn't leave the house after 6 o'clock, so for fear one of you would snatch her. Now, ain't that love? They think rape soon as they see you. And if they don't get the rape they screaming anyway, just so the search won't be in vain. Colored women worry themselves into bad health, just trying to hang on to your cuffs. Even little children, white and black, boys and girls, spend all their childhood eating their hearts out because they think you don't love them. And if that ain't enough, you love yourself. Nothing in this world loves a black man more than another black man. You hear of solitary white men, but niggas can't stay away from one another a whole day. So it looks to me like the envy of the world you are. Jude and Nell were laughing. He's saying, well, if that's the only way they got to show it, cut off my balls and throw me in jail. I just as soon they left me alone. But thinking that Sula had an odd way of looking at things and that her wide smile took some of the sting from that rattlesnake over her eye. A funny woman, he thought. Not that bad looking, but he could see why she wasn't married. She stirred a man's mind maybe, but not his body. He left his tie. The one with the squiggly yellow lines running lopsided across the dark blue field. Child, you have to know what happens next. So, after that little bit, what you find in the last 70 pages of the book is the betrayal of Sula to Nell. So, Sula ends up having an affair with Jude, and Jude leaves Nell for Sula. And I think they take on some sort of relationship maybe for a little bit less than a year. And Sula decides that she doesn't want to be with Jude anymore. And she just throws him away. She cares nothing about him. Because at the end of the day, in Sula's mind, it was just sex from the get-go. She didn't want to actually be with Jude, but Jude wanted to leave Nell and be with her for the excitement that she gave. She exuded sex appeal. You know, she learned all these things from her mother. But what they also failed to realize is that it was only for a little while, not forever. And so she leaves, and it destroys Nell and Sula's relationship as friends, and it destroys Nell as a woman. Nell is unable to even fathom what life is supposed to be like without Jude for a little while. She is disgusted with Sula. She is disgusted with Jude. She is disgusted with herself. She doesn't know how she's supposed to be, supposed to think. She doesn't know what to do. She's devastated. And she starts to turn into and feel the same ways about Sula as everybody else in the town. And there's no way of changing it or fixing it. That just is what it is, because Sula has done the ultimate thing. You came into my house and you took my man. And it's so sad. You know what I mean? One of the main things that I can gather from why Sula had the affair with Jude is because of, or her deciding to like rip apart what it was that society felt or deemed right. And she wanted to like deconstruct those norms. And maybe in hopes of Nell trying to make Nell understand that it doesn't have to, things just don't have to be one way. You know that they don't have to be one way. First of all, you didn't have to marry him. Second of all, you don't have to be the only person with him. We can share him. You're my girl, you're my friend. You know, we can share these niggas, right? Because that's all they are at the end of the day, right? They do what they want to do. They leave when they want to leave. We should be able to do the same. This is the idea of Sula being so wild, so reckless, so free, so dangerous. And if only Nell could like jump on the bandwagon and understand, girl, you're living your life all wrong. You're giving the men too much power. Put on your boots and let's go walking. Let's do what we're going to do with each other. Like, let's just do what we're going to do. They do what they're going to do, you know? Nell is she's a traditional wife. She was raised to be traditional. And she blames Sula. After this whole thing takes place, Nell blames Sula for the abandonment of Jude. When whole time, if Nell saw the signs, she would have seen that Jude was going to leave her anyway. It was a matter of time that he left. He was going to leave you anyway. It wasn't me. I didn't take him from you. He was already gone. And I think that action alone, coupled with a lot of other things that Sula did in this book, in her pursuit of truly being herself and rejecting those social norms, she was fine with the pariah that she had became, that sort of alienation that came with her being this free and dangerous woman. She was okay with adhering to whatever perception that the people up in the bottom had of her, so long as she was being her authentic self. And I find that very harrowing, to be honest with you guys. I feel one of the main reasons why this book speaks to me in the way that it does is because I'm also okay with those same consequences. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to say that Sula and I are one and the same, but I reject a lot of those same societal or social norms that are thrown at me on a daily basis. You know, I reject the notion or the idea of being this prim and proper woman already. Like, you know, even with something as simple as wearing a septum, even though mine is toned down, or me deciding that I want to tattoo my body, or me deciding that I am not going to hide my curves for anybody. I'm going to accentuate those things. Or me deciding that I am a divorced woman. I'm a mother. My daughter's 10 years old. I know she's watching me and looking at me. So I do have to do things in a specific way to where it's like that of a mother, but at the same time, I'm going to be sexy. I'm going to be free. I'm going to, you know, love on myself. Even me deciding that and going on dates or something like that, being exactly who I am, showing exactly all of the things that make up my person, like me not having any sort of representative show up for me, or, you know, me deciding that I don't want to get married again. Like, what, marriage? Are you serious? Or me, just all these things, all of the things that Sula represent in this novel, I second that notion. You know, me too. Those things are so important to me. Her sensuality, her sexuality, her deciding that, you know, yeah, I don't want to love one man. I don't want to just be with one man. Or I want to experience a plethora of this, that, and the third. You know, it's not foreign to me, and I don't look at her as any type of way. I'm not judging Sula because I am Sula. You know what I mean? I think that's why I like this book so much. And we can take all of these, I guess, the destructive nature of Sula, the sin and the sensuality that she represents in the eyes of Jude, and the betrayal, and the transience of her relationship to Nell. We can revisit the quote at the beginning of the story. And we can read it again. Nobody knew my rose of the world but me. I had too much glory. They don't want glory like that in nobody's heart. The rose tattoo. And remember, she has a rose-shaped birthmark on her face. And remember, I said the symbolizations of the rose: beauty, passion, fragility, transient, and death. And so all of these things happen to Sula in this book. Everything. She is transient. She is beautiful. She dies. She has passion. She lives a life full of passion. She's a beautiful woman. She has a life of beauty. She is fragile as well. She's wounded. And Sula also takes on an illness. I think in 1937, when she comes back home, Sula's 27, 28. They're 27. And then we talked about what happened with her and Jude. What happens in 1939? Let's talk about how Sula feels. All right, so it had surprised her a little and saddened her a good deal when Nell behaved the way the others would have. Nell was one of the reasons she had drifted back to Medallion. That and the boredom she found in Nashville, Detroit, New Orleans, New York, Philadelphia, Macon, San Diego. All those cities held the same people, working the same months, working the same mouths, sweating in the same sweat. The men who took her to one or another of those places had merged into the large personality, the same language of love, the same entertainments of love, the same cooling of love. Whenever she introduced her private thoughts into their rubbings or goings, they hooded their eyes. They taught her nothing but love tricks, shared nothing but worry, gave nothing but money. She had been looking all along for a friend, and it took her a while to discover that a lover was not a comrade and could never be for a woman. There we go. See what I'm saying? And then I just mentioned, basically, when I was doing my breakdown of the banter between Nell and Sula, this is what I'm saying. Like, the moral of this story truly is just like friendship above everything else. Like, fuck these niggas. Like, girl, get you a friend. Trust in your friend. Love on your friend. Invest in your friend. Like, girl. She had lied only once in her life to Nell about the reason for putting Eva out. And she could lie to her only because she cared about her. When she had come back home, social conversation was impossible for her because she could not lie. She could not say to those old acquaintances, "Hey girl, you looking good," when she saw how the years had dusted their bronze with ash. The eyes that had once opened wide to the moon, bent into grimy sickles of concern. The narrower their lives, the wider their hips. Like, when I tell you, this book really does something to my spirit and something to my soul. Like, this book confirms so much of what I deal with and what I go through. Y'all, I struggle on a daily basis with so many problems. I have so many problems, and I'm not talking about the typical ones that we always consider, like money or like finances or whatever we all think about. I know money is on a lot of people's minds, but I'm just saying, like, in general, I struggle in my day-to-day life, or I used to struggle with how people view me or my or what I gave off, or being perceived by other people, or should I conform to the methods of society in order to fit into that box and, like, maybe have somebody love me for me? Or should I just be a little bit more dangerous and a little bit more free? Am I talking too much? Am I talking too little? You know, do I have too much cleavage out? Or, you know, is this not enough? Or, you know, all of these things. And then I read stuff like, The narrower their lives, the wider their hips. I don't know what that means. I don't know truly what Toni Morrison is trying to say, but I can feel it, where it's just like, the more women do not hone in on their own possibilities, their dreams and their goals, the more they become less attractive. You know, and that's not to say that Toni Morrison was a fat shamer or anything like that. As she got older, she gained more and more weight, but she still was such a vibrant personality. She was it seems like she was such a joy still to be around, because she was working and doing things that made her feel complete, that made her feel whole. You know what I mean? Like, she had hobbies, you know what I'm saying? And like, for me, the hobby is like that thing that's going to keep me from from giving up on myself. You know what I mean? Or choosing me over a man. Choosing to focus on my daughter and to figure out how I want to parent her, because it is a constant struggle. But choosing that over deciding that I'm going to invest my time and energy into getting to know the opposite or the same sex, in hopes that they'll love me one day and give me all of this joy and gladness that I can't otherwise find on my own. Fuck that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not living my life in that way whatsoever. I could care less about the opposite sex, because I am heterosexual. I could care less about any of that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is just like, it's interesting to see how this book aids in that for me. Like, it really truly helps me to understand that the ways that I'm living my life are absolutely fine. My thought process is absolutely fine. You know, I've had so many men come and tell me that that's why you'll never have a man, or you do this too much or that too much, you'll never get a man. You'll never get. And it's so funny, because they don't realize you're nothing to have, you're nothing to get. Especially if you're talking like that. I want to be with my friends. You know what I'm saying? I want to be with my daughter. I want to read my books, and I want to make YouTube videos. You know what I mean? I don't want to be in your face. I don't give a damn about you. But that is what's, you know, and this book is like reassuring. It reassures me, you know? And so, yeah, okay. So Sula's dying, you guys. She is dying. I don't know if my throat's hurting, my throat chakra. I don't know. It's getting late though. When does Sula comes home in when did she come home? She comes home in 1937. And 3 years later, so she's 30 years old when she starts dying. She does have a brief love affair. Sula has a brief love affair with a man named Ajax. And as soon as Ajax started to realize that Sula was falling in love, as soon as Sula started realizing the same thing, it was just like, He hit the road. And honestly, after a little bit of fleetingness and like kind of brokenheartedness, she snapped out of it. Sula snapped out of it. Is laying on her deathbed at 30 years old. It never explicitly states what exactly she's dying from, but I can only think that it's cancer. I assume it's cancer. And Nell comes, and you know what? Let's actually go into what Nell says. All right, so Nell sat back on the little wooden chair. Anger skipped, but she realized that Sula was probably just showing off. No telling what shape she was really in, but there was no point in saying anything other than what was the truth. I always understood how you could take a man. Now I understand why you can't keep none. Is that what I'm supposed to do? Spend my life keeping a man? They worth keeping, Sula. They ain't worth more than me. And besides, I never loved no man because he was worth it. Worth didn't have anything to do with it. What did? My mind did. That's all. Well, I guess that's it. You own the world and the rest of us is renting. You ride the pony and we shovel the shit. I didn't come up here for this kind of talk, Sula. No. I come to see about you. But now you opened it up, I may as well close it. Nell's fingers closed around the brass rail of the bed. Now she would ask her, how come you did it, Sula? There was a silence, but Nell felt no obligation to fill it. Sula stirred a little under the covers. She looked bored as she sucked her teeth. Well, there was this space in front of me, behind me, in my head. Some space. And Jude filled it up. That's all. He just filled up the space. You mean you didn't even love him? The feel of the brass was in Nell's mouth. It wasn't even loving him? Sula looked toward the boarded up window again. Her eyes fluttered as if she were about to fall off into sleep. But Nell held her stomach in. But what about me? What about me? Why didn't you think about me? Didn't I count? I never hurt you. What did you take him for if you didn't love him? And why didn't you think about me? And then I was good to you, Sula. Why don't that matter? Sula turned her head away from the boarded window. Her voice was quiet and the steamed rose over her eye was very dark. It matters, Nell, but only to you. Not to anybody else. Being good to somebody is just like being mean to somebody. Risky. You don't get nothing for it. Nell took her hands from the brass railing. She was annoyed with herself. Finally, when she had gotten the nerve to ask the question, the right question, it made no difference. Sula couldn't give her a sensible answer because she didn't know. Would be, in fact, the last to know. Talking to her about right and wrong was like talking to the Deweys. She picked at the fridge on Sula's bedspread and said softly, we were friends. Oh yes, good friends, Sula said. And you didn't love me enough to leave him alone, to let him love me. You had to take him away. What you mean, take him away? I didn't kill him. I just fucked him. If we were such good friends, how come you couldn't get over that? You laying there in the bed without a dime or a friend to your name, having done all the dirt you did in this town, and you still expect folks to love you? Sula raised herself up on her elbows. Her face glistened with the dew of fever. She opened her mouth as though to say something, then fell back on the pillows and sighed. Oh, they'll love me all right. It will take time, but they'll love me. The sound of her voice was as soft and distant as the look in her eyes. And this is Sula's last words. Sula felt her face smiling. Well, I be damned, she thought. It didn't even hurt. Wait till I tell Nell. Wait till I tell Nell. The last person that she thought about was who? The last person that Sula thought about was Nell. And then I want to skip to the last page. I want to skip to the last page. Suddenly, Nell stopped. Her eye twitched and burned a little. Sula, she whispered, gazing at the tops of the trees. Sula. Leaves stirred, mud shifted. There was a smell of overripe green things. A soft ball of fur broke and scattered like dandelion spores in the breeze. All that time, I thought, I was missing Jude. And the loss pressed down on her chest and came up into her throat. We was girls together, she said, as though explaining something. Oh, Lord, Sula, she cried. Girl, 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 girl. It was a fine cry, loud and long. But it had no bottom and it had no top. Just circles and circles of sorrow. And girl, I'm about to cry now. I'm about to cry now. Because it's so good. This book is so good. I know I said a lot without saying a lot, but my main takeaway from this story is understanding the true definition of friendship and a force that a bond can be reckoned with if you have one. And although a lot of Sula's destructive behavior was centered on that deep sense of loneliness that she had and really trying to nurse it. She was nursing that loneliness, and she was also nursing the idea of breaking away from the norms that society has put on her in order to flex her authenticity muscle, in a sense, or to understand that to be free is far more important to have validation from others. But she hurt a lot of people in hindsight by being this woman. But as you guys can see, after her death, long after her death, because what I read, the last part that I read in the book was in 1965. Sula died in 1940. So 25 years later, Nell finally realized that all of these years have gone by, and who she truly missed was her best friend. You know? And so yeah, the main premise of everything that I'm saying is to be authentically you. You don't have to go about things the way that Sula went about things, but I'm more so focused on Sula's mindset. You know, not her actions, but her mindset. You know, that's really important to me. And not living your life with the expectations that other people have on your back. Like, scratch that, cut that. It's not about that. Life is not about that at all. Life is about what you want, what you need, what you desire, and to live out those passions, you know? It's all about self-discovery. And I just think that having an identity outside of your community is essential for your growth as a human being, as a woman. And I'm so thankful to Toni Morrison, because these are the things that she teaches me. You know, these are the reasons why I read. And I love this book. I love this book so much. This book means a lot to me. I'm going to read it again in the future and hopefully do it better justice than I did today. But I have really tried my best. I want you guys to know I've been sitting here for 3.5 hours. This is 3.5 hours later, and I hope I still look pretty. So yeah, that's been my Sula video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys I hope you stay to the end. I hope you comment. I hope you subscribe, share the video, and we'll be back for more. So yeah, until next time, deuces.